trash deserves to be burned. I wish your face had been burned, too. My mother, Beth, looked down at the white steam rising from my arm and the skin that was rapidly turning red and blistered, and said this without a shred of hesitation. There was no panic in her voice, no maternal instinct to reach down and help. Just cold, surgical calculation. My sister, Allison, had opened the lid of the electric kettle she had been using to make tea and poured its contents directly over me without a second thought. She didn't flinch. She didn't drop the kettle in shock. She aimed, and she delivered. Seconds later, a searing pain like my nerves were on fire shot through me, and I screamed, collapsing onto the kitchen floor. The tile was cold against my back, but that cold was nothing compared to the inferno eating my left arm and chest. Allison slammed the empty stainless steel kettle onto the counter with a loud bang and clicked her tongue at the wet floor. "This is the worst. It's soaking wet because of you. What are you going to do about it?" she said, checking to make sure no water had splashed on her designer dress. She smoothed the fabric with her manicured fingers, more concerned with a potential stain than her sister's third-degree burns. "Stop making such a scene, Sarah. The guests can hear you," my mother said over her shoulder, already turning back toward the living room where the party music was still playing. At that moment, Chris, my lawyer, gasped as he took in the sight of me curled on the floor. My arm darkened and blistered. He had stepped into the kitchen to ask about the dessert timing, but instead found a crime scene. His face went pale. "I'm calling an ambulance." "And the police," he said, pulling his phone from his pocket with trembling hands. His voice was steady despite his shaking fingers. My mother, Beth, spun around quickly, putting on a pleasant mask-like smile as she approached him. "That's unnecessary. Sarah was just clumsy and spilled the kettle herself. You know how she is. Always in her own world." But Chris ignored her. He had already given the 911 operator our address. "It's a severe burn. It appears to have been deliberate. Please hurry." The instant he said the word deliberate, my mother's smile vanished. It was like watching a mannequin crack. The sound of sirens began faintly in the distance and grew louder by the second, wailing through the suburban afternoon. Just as the paramedics burst in with a stretcher, my mother crouched next to me on the floor. Her perfume was cloying, sweet, and suffocating. She pressed her lips close to my ear and whispered lowly, her breath hot against my skin. "Listen carefully, Sarah. This is an accident. You tripped on your own. You know what will happen if you say anything unnecessary, right? You'll have nothing. No family. No home. No one." The footsteps of the police entering the kitchen echoed like the drums announcing the start of a war. Heavy boots on tile. The jingle of handcuffs and badges. "It's okay, Sarah. You're safe now," Chris said, kneeling beside me and putting a gentle hand on my unburned shoulder, but my body continued to shake uncontrollably. Not from the shock. Not entirely from the pain. From the knowledge that my own mother had just threatened me while I lay in a pool of boiling water. At the hospital, the attending doctor's expression darkened the moment he saw my arm. He didn't speak for a long 10 seconds. He just stared at the mottled red and black tissue, then exchanged a glance with the nurse. Removing the necrotic tissue and dirt from my burned skin was excruciating, almost torture, even under heavy anesthesia. I drifted in and out of consciousness, catching fragments of conversation, graft, infection risk, permanent scarring. Once the treatment was done and the painkillers began to take effect, partially clearing the fog in my mind, 2 police officers knocked on the hospital room door. "You must be Sarah Walker. May we speak with you for a moment?" The detective's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp and observant. He introduced himself as Detective Jackson, a man in his 40s with graying temples and a leather notebook. "We've already spoken to your mother and sister about what happened," he continued, glancing at his notes. "According to them, you slipped on the kitchen floor, grabbed the kettle filled with boiling water, and ended up scalding yourself. They say it was purely an unfortunate accident. Very unfortunate, given it was your birthday. I had expected this. Of course I had. My mother was nothing if not predictable. But hearing the lie spoken aloud, so perfectly rehearsed, still sent a chill through me. The detective continued. And your mother was a bit concerned. She mentioned that due to recent work stress, you've been mentally unstable, distracted, prone to episodes. My mother was trying to paint me as a mentally unstable daughter to cover up my burns. That way, if I claimed Allison had done it, it could be dismissed as delusion or paranoia. A classic tactic. Isolate the victim, question their credibility, control the narrative. Chris started to speak, his mouth opening to object, but I stopped him with a raised hand. My left arm was wrapped in bandages like a mummy, but my right was free. Detective, my mother and sister are lying. My voice was hoarse from screaming, but it was firm. Steady. I did not slip. I did not touch the kettle. I was standing 6 feet away from the kitchen island when Allison came in. The detective frowned, pausing mid-note. His pen hovered over the page. It was Allison who held the kettle and poured it on me. She aimed directly at me, looking me in the eyes. There was no accident. There was no slip. She did it on purpose because of what I told her about the car. The room fell into a frozen silence. Even the beeping of the heart monitor seemed to pause. That is a very serious accusation, Sarah. This is treated completely differently from a simple accident or injury case. If you're lying or if you're mistaken, there could be consequences for filing a false report. I understand. But I have evidence. I indicated my smartphone on the bedside table, cradling my aching left arm. Minutes before the incident, the kitchen was being set up for my birthday party. And there's a pet camera in the living room. The detective's eyes sharpened. He exchanged a glance with his partner. At home, my mother installed a high-definition network camera to monitor the dog she doted on. It gives a clear view of both the living room and the kitchen doorway. The camera was on that day. I made sure of it. And there's a motive. This wasn't just a fight. It's about money. Money? The detective asked, skepticism creeping into his voice. Yes, a $350,000 investment and the BMW used as collateral. I felt ready for the first time to address the twisted core of my family relationships. The painkillers had dulled the physical agony, but the emotional weight was still there, pressing down on my chest like a stone. 3 years earlier, in the dim office of my father, Richard, who ran Walker Construction, the company was nearly bankrupt. I remember the dust motes floating in the slivers of afternoon light. I remember the smell of old paper and desperation. Yet my parents refused to face reality. They blamed the economy, blamed the banks, blamed everyone except themselves. They refused to admit that their reckless spending, the luxury vacations, the private schools for Allison, the country club memberships, was the real reason for the company's decline. I was 22 at the time. While still in college, I had self-taught trading and concentrated investments in tech stocks, already amassing significant liquid assets. I wasn't a prodigy. I was just disciplined. While Allison partied, I studied market trends. While my mother shopped, I built spreadsheets. That day, I placed a $350,000 cashier's check on my father's mahogany desk. It was a beautiful desk, imported from Italy, bought with money the company didn't have. So, you finally decided to be a good daughter. Took you long enough, he snorted, acting as if it were my obligation to provide the money. He didn't say thank you. He didn't ask how I earned it. My mother chimed in from the leather chair in the corner. Sarah, now you can finally contribute to the family. Allison brings joy with her looks and charm, but you'll support us with your wallet. That's your role. I let that humiliating remark slide without expression. I had heard worse. I had heard it all before. The smart one. The ugly one. The investment vehicle in human form. I then pulled from my bag a thick stack of documents prepared by my lawyer and spread them across the desk. 23 pages of legal jargon, carefully constructed to protect me. Dad, this isn't a donation. It's a business investment. That's why you need to sign this contract. My father frowned irritably and flipped through the documents roughly, his thick fingers smudging the ink. A contract between family members? Ridiculous. Family has nothing to do with business. Then treat me like a bank. If you don't sign, I'll tear up the check right now. Right here. And you can explain to the creditors why the construction company is shutting down. Faced with my unwavering tone, he clicked his tongue but reluctantly took the pen. He signed with a flourish, as if he were doing me a favor. Specifically, the contract stipulated that all assets purchased with this investment would remain under my first priority lien until full repayment. And if they defaulted, ownership would immediately transfer to me. Chris had explained it to me over 3 long meetings. It was ironclad. The very first thing they wanted was a new company car. Not new equipment. Not to pay off high-interest loans. A car. It was a luxury SUV for my mother and Allison to go to the mall and for my father to pull up to the golf course in style. The day after my investment funds were deposited, they didn't hesitate to head to a high-end car dealership. They ordered a fully loaded pearl-white BMW X7 worth $120,000, complete with every upgrade and option. The vehicle was registered under the company for tax purposes, but it was implicitly understood that Allison would be the primary user. She had already picked out the license plate frame, Allison's ride. What they didn't realize was that the moment that BMW was purchased with my money, it legally became a moving collateral under my control. That detail would set the stage for the tragic night 3 years later and, ultimately, my complete legal victory. From the day the white BMW X7 was delivered, Allison acted as if she were royalty, more so than ever. She posted dozens of photos on social media. Driving with sunglasses, leaning against the hood, filling the trunk with shopping bags. Hard work pays off, the captions read. None of it was true. The following 3 years were filled with humiliation and patience on my end, but I had a reason I couldn't leave home. It was to ensure that every clause of that contract was enforced. If I moved out, they would claim I had abandoned my interest. I had to stay. I had to watch. I became their watcher, a reserve enforcer of sorts. After the family went to sleep, I accessed the company's books from my room, checking every fund flow in detail. I carefully saved evidence of their extravagance, Allison's traffic tickets, my mother's abusive text messages, my father's suspicious cash withdrawals, into a hidden cloud folder with military-grade encryption. Then, 3 years later, my father's company began to struggle financially again. The housing market had dipped, but the real problem was the same as before: spending. Interest payments to me were delayed for 2 consecutive months. Then a 3rd month approached. By contract, I could exercise my lien after the 3rd month of default. That timing coincided almost exactly with my 25th birthday. I intended to celebrate that day as my independence anniversary. I had already picked out an apartment. I had already hired movers. But 2 weeks before the party, that plan was shattered at breakfast. Unbelievable. My Instagram followers passed 10,000, and the manager is promoting me to senior sales assistant. Allison burst into the kitchen waving her phone like a trophy. She was wearing a silk robe, and her hair was perfectly curled even at 8 in the morning. My mother immediately lit up, hugging her tightly. That's wonderful, Allison. My daughter finally recognized for her beauty and talent by the world. She kissed both of Allison's cheeks. Then she turned to me, her eyes cold and calculating. Here's the plan. We'll throw a big promotion party at the end of the month. Invite the relatives, neighbors, Dad's business contacts, everyone. We'll showcase Allison's success. I paused, my fork hovering over my oatmeal. Quietly, I attempted to protest. That day is my birthday. And I've already booked a restaurant. A nice one. I put down a deposit. My mother snorted. A restaurant? Waste of money. Cancel it. The house is bigger and grander, and catering is cheaper. And combining your modest birthday with Allison's extravagant celebration kills 2 birds with 1 stone. You always try to disrupt the family unity. Always. I stayed silent for a moment, calculating rapidly in my mind. A restaurant would have been pleasant, but this was an opportunity. If I invited my business partners as Allison's guests, they would see the family's reality firsthand. They would witness the dysfunction. They could become my strongest witnesses in any future legal proceedings. Fine. I'll cancel the restaurant. We'll hold it at home. My mother smiled triumphantly, immediately pulling out her notepad. That's better. You handle the food and drinks. Charge it to Dad's company account. The champagne for Allison must be top tier, Veuve Clicquot, nothing less. For the regular guests, relabeled cheap bottles from the grocery store. No one will know the difference. Allison added imperiously, and clean the house thoroughly, especially the garage. I want my BMW displayed in the best spot. Polish the floor. Set up spotlights. I want it to look like a showroom. She planned to flaunt a car that wasn't hers as proof of her success. The irony was almost beautiful. I chuckled inwardly. I added my lawyer and investor friends to the guest list as originally intended. 3 names. That was all I needed. On the day of the party, the living room and garden were filled with pink and gold balloons, reflecting my mother's flamboyant taste. Streamers hung from every doorway. A DJ had been hired. An ice sculpture of Allison's face sat melting on the buffet table. I spent the morning in a black apron, running around completely as a free servant. I arranged hors d'oeuvres. I refilled ice buckets. I directed the catering staff. No one thanked me. In the garden's most prominent spot sat the white BMW X7, which I had waxed the night before until it gleamed like a mirror. Allison posed in front of it like a model, leaning against the hood and tossing her hair, boasting to arriving guests. Yes, my work is going great. This car is a reward for myself. You've got to show the results of your effort. You've got to manifest your success. Unaware neighbors showered her with praises. So impressive. What a young achiever. Allison, you've always been the special one. Among the crowd were my friends, the ones I had invited deliberately. One of them, my lawyer Chris, came in a tailored suit and quietly sipped a drink near the punch bowl. He didn't mingle. He observed. You're friends with Sarah? Allison asked him, batting her eyelashes. She's a bit plain, isn't she? You've got to shine like me to make it in this world. I'm the star of this family. Chris smiled politely, maintaining his gentlemanly composure. Sarah is very reliable and trustworthy. By the way, that's a beautiful car. Is it under your father's company? Or is it yours personally? Allison scoffed, swirling her champagne glass. Dad's company? Please. I basically support it. In practice, it's mine. I plan to formally transfer the title soon. Any day now. Her words were legally fatal and utterly false, but she was drunk on her own lies and cheap champagne. Behind Chris's glasses, a cold, calculating glint of securing testimony shone. I saw him subtly tap his phone screen, recording the conversation. Meanwhile, my father Richard cornered my investor friend Paul near the grill. Paul was a quiet man in his 50s, worth about $8 million, and he trusted me implicitly. My father didn't know that. Kids these days are afraid of risk, but not me, my father boasted, a cigar in one hand and a whiskey in the other. I've gotten where I am because I take big swings. Huge swings. That's why Walker Construction is still standing. Paul already knew that the source of that big swing was the pocket money of the daughter silently serving drinks in front of him. Me. But he simply nodded along, playing the role of an interested businessman. I see. So, your funding came from the bank? Or perhaps with some help from your family? A wealthy relative, maybe? When Paul prodded gently, my father lowered his voice conspiratorially. No. The bank trusts my personal business sense entirely. Family? They're nothing but money drains, especially the younger one. No talent at all. No social skills. And she should be grateful we even let her live at home. Most parents would have kicked her out by now. They didn't realize it. The very friends of the Sarah they belittled were the people who held the keys to their fate. Paul caught my eye from across the garden and gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. He had heard enough. My mother then shouted from the living room, her voice cutting through the music. Sarah, is the cake ready yet? Bring out the tea before Allison's speech. Why are you so slow? Honestly, it's like you want to ruin everything. I silently returned to the kitchen. The cake was on the counter, 3 tiers of white frosting. The tea kettle was just beginning to whistle on the stove. Allison followed me in a moment later, wanting tea to warm her throat before her grand speech. She was still holding her champagne glass, still glowing with attention. Hey, I told you to bring me tea before my speech. I need to stay hydrated. Vocal cords and all. She leaned against the counter. And that guy with the glasses, is he your friend? She meant Chris, my attorney, whom she'd been talking to earlier. When I mentioned the BMW, he kept smirking. Rude man. Probably jealous of someone successful like me. Men are so fragile. I turned to face her. The kettle was boiling behind me, steam rising in white plumes. He wasn't smirking, Allison. He was disgusted. She froze. Her champagne glass stopped halfway to her lips. What? What's that supposed to mean? He's my lawyer. And he's the one who drafted the purchase contract for that BMW you were bragging about. I looked her straight in the eyes across the counter. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in. Which means he's the only person here who knows that the car wasn't bought with Dad's company money. It was bought with my $350,000 investment. And legally, it's collateral under my control. Not yours. Never yours. I watched all the color drain from her face. Her perfectly made-up cheeks went gray. Her lips parted, then closed. Liar, she whispered. There's no way someone as plain as you has that kind of money. You're lying. You've always been jealous of me. Always. It's not a lie. Check the registration. Check the insurance. You'll see my name. Primary lien holder, Sarah Walker. I paused, letting it sink in. The car you've been driving for 3 years? It was never yours. You were just borrowing it. And now I'm calling in the loan. I dealt her the decisive blow. Her breathing turned ragged, her eyes starting desperately as she tried to reject reality. I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, the same calculation my mother made, but without the intelligence. You can't. With an incoherent shriek, she lunged toward the electric kettle on the counter, the one filled with freshly boiled water. The lid was still open from when I had checked the temperature. I watched in slow motion as reason left her eyes, replaced by pure malice. There was no hesitation, no moment of doubt. She didn't grab a towel or a pot holder. She grabbed the kettle by its plastic handle, swung it back like a tennis racket, and launched the contents straight toward me. The boiling water arced through the air in a silver wave. It caught the kitchen light for just a moment, beautiful and lethal. Then it crashed onto my left arm and chest. The sound was horrible. A wet, searing hiss. My skin bubbling instantly. My scream shook the kitchen windows. Immediately after, Allison slammed the empty kettle onto the counter with a loud metallic clang that echoed like a gong. She didn't look horrified. She looked satisfied. The moment my scream echoed into the living room, the music and conversations ceased instantly. I could hear the confused murmurs of guests, the clinking of glasses stopping mid-toast. Allison cracked the swinging door open just enough to peek inside, then turned back with a bright, cheerful smile and clapped her hands. She had transformed in an instant from attacker to hostess. Everyone, so sorry. Sarah had one of her clumsy moments again. Nothing serious. Please enjoy the party. The cake will be out shortly. Her voice was light and bubbly, and many guests believed her, returning to their conversations with relieved laughter. But only my lawyer, Chris, and my investor, Paul, remained still. They stood motionless near the fireplace, watching the kitchen door. Chris quietly slipped his hand into his suit jacket and opened a recording app on his phone. He had been waiting for this moment. Back in the kitchen, my mother picked up the empty kettle Allison had slammed down. She didn't check on me. She didn't call for help. She pulled a dish towel from the drawer, wiped the kettle clean of fingerprints, and rolled it across the floor to rest by my feet. Listen carefully, Allison. She didn't whisper to me. She spoke to her panicked daughter in a low, controlled tone, the same tone she used to plan dinner parties. When the police arrive, this is what you say. Sarah slipped on some water. She lost her balance, grabbed the kettle on the counter, and spilled it on herself. You tried to help, but you couldn't reach her in time. Got it? Repeated back. Allison nodded frantically, her face pale beneath her makeup. I get it. I didn't do anything. She slipped on her own. It's not my fault. I wasn't even near her. She kept repeating it like a spell, trying to implant the false memory into herself. My mother then splashed water from the sink across the floor, deliberately creating a slippery, dangerous surface. She spread it with her foot. There. Perfect. Sarah, you understand, don't you? My mother finally looked down at me, still curled on the floor. If you say anything stupid and ruin Allison's future, you'll have nowhere left to belong. No family. No money. No home. I'll make sure of it. Then she pressed her fingers to her eyes, smearing her mascara slightly. She practiced her expression in the reflection of the microwave. Oh my, how careless of me. Poor Sarah slipped and fell. My mother pressed her fake tears to her cheeks just as the police entered the kitchen. 2 officers, 1 male and 1 female. The male officer began examining the scene, the puddle of water, the kettle on the floor, me on the stretcher. At first glance, it did look like a tragic household accident. A clumsy birthday girl. An unfortunate slip. But he sensed something off. Because in the corner of the living room, Chris approached him calmly, offering his business card and whispering something. I represent the victim, Sarah Walker. And I have a recording of everything that was just said in that kitchen, the threats, the cover-up, the confession of intent. This was not an accident. It was assault. Chris spoke softly, but it was enough to harden the officer's expression. He glanced at the kitchen, then back at Chris, then called for his partner. That was the moment my counterattack began. I was moved from the ICU to a private room in the general ward about a day after the incident. Even with painkillers continuously dripping through the floor, the sensation of burning skin along my left arm and chest never fully subsided. It was a constant, low-grade fire. Dr. Baker stood by my bedside holding a thick binder of medical literature. His voice was clinical, emotionless, as he explained the extent of my injuries. Will the scars remain? I asked. My voice was small. He adjusted his glasses and answered honestly. He never lied to his patients. There is a high likelihood of keloid scarring. Reconstructive surgery can lessen the appearance, but your skin will not return to its original state. Including rehabilitation and possible skin grafts, you're looking at a minimum of 6 months for full recovery. Possibly longer. I didn't cry. They had branded me with something that would never disappear. A permanent reminder of who they were. Then I decided that I would leave an indelible mark on their lives as well. Doctor, I need a detailed medical report. Please include photographs. High resolution. We'll use it in court. As the doctor left, there was a knock at the door. Chris, my lawyer, and Detective Jackson, who had questioned the family yesterday, entered the room. I had the bed raised and turned to face Jackson. Miss Walker, we spoke again with your mother and sister yesterday. They still insist this was an accident. They haven't changed their story. Sarah slipped on a wet floor. The detective spoke without opening his notebook, just watching my face. However, our on-site inspection uncovered several inconsistencies. He glanced at Chris. Chris interjected. Inconsistencies? It's more than that. The location where Sarah allegedly slipped, the position of the kettle, the spread pattern of the hot water, analyzing the trajectory, it's far too horizontal to have spilled from a fall. Physics doesn't lie. This is clearly the result of someone intentionally pouring from a height with force. The detective faced me, his eyes serious. We now have circumstantial evidence supporting your testimony. The physical evidence aligns with your version of events, not theirs. But to request an arrest warrant, we need definitive proof of intent to harm. A smoking gun. I quietly played my trump card. Detective, have you checked the network camera in the living room? Jackson shook his head. Your mother said it was broken and not recording. We checked the unit. The SD card had been removed. The slot was empty, just as I expected. My mother had carefully tried to destroy the evidence. She had thought of almost everything. But she forgot one thing, I said, glancing at Chris. That camera not only stores footage locally on the SD card, it automatically backs up to the cloud. 24/7 continuous recording. And I control that cloud account. I pay the monthly subscription fee. My mother didn't know that. Jackson's eyes widened. So, there's footage? Yes. Last night I had Chris remotely access the server and preserve the data. The entire event is on video. Allison picking up the kettle. The pour. My mother cleaning the fingerprints. Everything. Jackson stared at the floor for a long moment, then slowly looked up. He stood and straightened the collar of his jacket. I'll request a warrant from the judge immediately. We'll begin investigating for assault and evidence tampering. Possibly attempted murder, depending on what the video shows. Embezzlement? I asked. Jackson smiled faintly. Yes. We looked into the BMW your sister was bragging about. Company asset used for personal benefit. There's strong suspicion she misused company funds for personal gain. That's a felony in this state. The police had already uncovered more than I had anticipated. The counterattack was ready. Next came the execution. The next afternoon, Chris positioned himself outside my family home via video call, under the pretense of asset preservation, while I watched from my hospital room. 2 police cars slid silently into the driveway. No sirens this time. No warning. Detective Jackson and a group of uniformed officers stepped out, their shoes crunching on the gravel. The intercom rang. Once. Twice. After a long moment, the door opened. It was my mother who appeared, still wearing her party dress from the day before. What is this? It's barely 11 a.m. We haven't even had coffee. But Jackson ignored her and presented the warrant with a flat, official voice. This is an arrest warrant for Allison Walker and a search and seizure warrant for this residence. Suspected offenses: second-degree assault, evidence tampering, and misappropriation of company assets. Step aside, please. As my mother screamed, "You can't be serious," the officers entered forcefully. I heard glass breaking, drawers opening, my mother's voice rising in hysterics. Minutes later, Allison, handcuffed behind her back, was dragged out by 2 officers. She was still in her pajamas, her hair a mess, her mascara streaked down her face. Let me go. Mom, Dad, do something. She screamed hysterically, twisting against the cuffs. I didn't do anything. It was an accident. Why am I being taken? She's lying. Sarah is lying. As she was shoved toward the back seat of the police car, she noticed Chris filming with his phone from the sidewalk. Her eyes went wide. Sarah, I know you're watching. This is your doing, isn't it? I'll never forgive you. I'll hate you for the rest of my life. Do you hear me? I'll hate you forever. She roared like a wild animal, but the officers held her head down and pushed her inside. The door slammed. The engine started. I watched the taillights fade from the video feed on my phone. The image was grainy, but the satisfaction was crystal clear. Thank you, Chris. Now we start the real work. Do it thoroughly. Of course. They'll return everything they took from you. With interest. Compounded daily. After the call ended, the hospital room fell silent once again. It was the first quiet moment I had experienced since I had begun reclaiming my life. The first deep breath in years. 3 days after the arrest, Allison remained in custody. Normally, she would have been released on bail, but the court denied it, citing the risk of evidence tampering and witness intimidation. My parents had been informed by the court-appointed attorney that a prison sentence was inevitable unless a settlement with the victim, me, was reached. Without it, several years of incarceration were possible. Then, they were summoned to Chris's law office. I monitored the meeting via video call from my hospital room. On screen, my parents looked as if they had aged 10 years in just a few days. My father's shirt was wrinkled. My mother's hair was unwashed. The party was over. Let me be blunt, Chris said, his voice calm and professional. My client, Sarah Walker, is willing to submit a petition to the prosecution to reduce the punitive demand against your daughter and withdraw part of the civil damages. Claim. She is not without mercy. My mother looked up, her eyes pleading and wet. Really? Oh, thank God. Sarah wouldn't abandon her family. I knew it. I knew she would come around. Don't misunderstand. Chris cut her off coldly, leaning forward across the desk. This is not mercy. This is a transaction with clear conditions. Sarah is a businesswoman. She treats this as a business negotiation. He held up 2 fingers. The conditions are simple. First, repay immediately in full the $350,000 investment Ms. Walker made in your company 3 years ago, plus unpaid interest and late fees, calculated per the contract. The total comes to $420,000. Due in full within 30 days. My father groaned, a sound of disbelief escaping his lips. There's no way we have that kind of money. The accounts are frozen. The house is under lien. We can't even pay the caterers from the party. As expected, Chris said, his expression calm as ever. Then here's the second option. The only realistic choice you have left. He pulled another document from the stack and placed it in the center of the table. It was 5 pages long, with yellow tabs marking the signature lines. Under the special provisions of the original contract, the ownership of the collateral, the 2024 BMW X7, will be transferred immediately to Ms. Walker. Additionally, you will agree to a permanent restraining order. No contact. No approach within a 1/4-mile radius of Ms. Walker by any means, now or in the future. No phone calls. No letters. No accidental run-ins at the grocery store. My mother's voice trembled as she spoke. You mean you're taking the car away from Allison? That's all she is left. That's her identity. Chris removed his glasses and slowly wiped the lenses with a microfiber cloth. He looked almost bored. Beth, I think you still don't understand the gravity of the situation. Your daughter committed a violent felony. The video evidence is undeniable. The choice is simple. Lose the car and regain your freedom, or keep the car and spend the next several years behind bars. There is no third option. No negotiation. No appeal. My father buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. My mother bit her lip, tears streaming down her cheeks. But they weren't tears for Allison. They weren't tears for me. They were the bitter tears of their pride and status being stripped away, piece by piece. Sarah, my mother whispered in a shaking voice, is she laughing at us right now? Is she watching this and smiling? Chris glanced at the monitor camera in the corner of his office, then turned back to them. No, she's no longer looking at you at all. She's watching only the future you tried to steal from her and the legal steps she is taking to reclaim it. You are no longer part of her story. You are a footnote. After a long, heavy silence, my father shakily picked up a pen. His hand trembled as he signed the document with a rough, jagged signature. He tossed the pen aside like it had bitten him. My mother, still crying, signed next to him. Her signature was neat, almost calligraphic, even through the tears. Old habits. Deal closed, Chris said, stamping the document with a firm thud. In that instant, one of the many chains that had bound me for years shattered with a satisfying, almost musical sound. It wasn't revenge. It was pure business. Cause and effect. Action and consequence. For the first time in years, I felt I could truly breathe. The day I was discharged, the sky outside was ironically clear and blue. Not a single cloud. The kind of day that belonged on a postcard. Chris was waiting at the hospital entrance. Next to him, gleaming in the sunlight, was the white BMW X7, freshly washed and waxed. The spotlights from the party were gone, but the car looked better than ever. He smiled and handed me the keys. They were warm from sitting in the sun. You earned this. Every scratch, every mile. I pressed the accelerator and slid out of the parking lot, leaving the hospital behind. The burn on my left arm stung slightly as I gripped the wheel, but it was proof that I was alive. Proof that I had survived. I entered a new destination into the navigation system, a city in a neighboring state, 400 miles from my childhood home. There, my new apartment and office were waiting. A fresh start. A year passed since that night. I now run my own investment consulting firm. Phoenix Capital. Named for the bird that rises from the ashes. The burn on my left arm remains, a permanent mark of survival and resilience. I don't hide it. I don't cover it with makeup or long sleeves. It is mine. News of my family reached me only through rumors and occasional reports from Chris. Allison ultimately received a 2-year prison sentence, suspended for 4 years. Her first offense and my petition spared her from actual incarceration, but the cost was severe. Her record for assault and abuse of a sibling spread across the internet like wildfire. Her real name and photo became a permanent digital tattoo. The 10,000 followers she once boasted about turned into critics. They left comments on every post, dug up every photo. She deleted all her accounts eventually. She reportedly works night shifts at a remote warehouse now, avoiding all human contact. No Instagram. No BMW. No admirers. My father's construction company collapsed the moment my financial support was withdrawn. During the subsequent investigation, long-standing accounting fraud and bank loan scams were uncovered, dating back nearly a decade. He was arrested and charged with fraud. The family home was seized and auctioned off for a fraction of its value. My mother lost her property and her social status. She ended up in a cheap apartment complex on the edge of town, living on welfare and food stamps. She still tells anyone who will listen that it's all Sarah's fault. That I was always a difficult child. That I destroyed the family. But no one believes her delusions anymore. She is just another bitter woman in a sad apartment, talking to herself. I am now behind the wheel of that white BMW X7, driving along the coastline. The ocean is to my right, endless and blue. The wind is in my hair. The radio is playing something soft and instrumental. Here, in my new city, I have friends who respect me, colleagues who value my mind, work that challenges and fulfills me, and above all, freedom that no one can ever take from me. The car accelerates smoothly, leaving the past behind in the rearview mirror, racing into an endless future. Their story is over, but mine is just beginning.